to the actual Soul Mechanics channel. Of course, we're publishing the podcast on the Soul Mechanics channel as it stands, but that's going to be for another channel eventually when I get around to building it. I'm not sure if I can actually do it on the telephone. I might need to go use the computer at home base for that, but it appears as though bruising is taking forever and ever to heal, but I do believe my nose actually looks a little better than it did before they broke it, honestly. So that's an update for that. Another update on the podcast itself. This will be 3 people now that dropped out last minute, and it's not cool to do that. I mean, I explained to you guys what the podcast is, that it's just starting out, what we're intending to do with it, what the purpose of it is, everything about it. I explained it very clearly. There's no room for misunderstanding here. Yet, for whatever reason, without any provocation or, no causal influence whatsoever that I can see transpiring yet, come down to the wire, people either just reject, flat out, just say no, or, well, they all ultimately wind up blocking me because I bitch at them about it. And I apologize for calling you guys cowards in my statement, but I mean, you are what you present yourself as being. Okay, you guys were happy about doing this, you knew it was an important thing, you knew that, you'd be helping us to get this started, and that we'd be helping you to promote whatever it is you're hoping to promote, and, get your story out there, and you were all for it, you were all thumbs, everything was awesome, you were even psyched about it, 2 of you were psyched about it, and then, like I said, come down to the wire, one of you just says no, and another 2 just block me, without saying anything whatsoever. I mean, I didn't speak to you since we had agreed to do this, so I know that I didn't say anything that could have influenced you in that manner. I don't know. No, but that's not what this is about. This video is in the podcast. In the last one, we spoke about Mandy's view on the other side, as it were, crossing over or dying, or just the afterlife realm or what have you. And she and I have disagreements on this to some extent. Not necessarily. The only disagreement is that she has the view on her understanding as it being absolute, whereas my view on it is that it's her view, and everybody's entitled to their own view, and in fact does possess and inherit their own view. Everybody's responsible for their own destination, as it were. So I do believe that anything can happen, and this is based on my own experience, honestly. I mean, we have many people, many travelers, spotters, psychonauts, people out there, operatives, who have come back with the same understanding of this, and I have the same understanding. I agree with them wholeheartedly because I've experienced it on several occasions, and I wanted to make this as a kind of a follow-up to the Fearing the Never video that I did a while back on NDEs and such, because I had suggested in the podcast that maybe we should have somebody on who has had a near-death experience and could speak on that, and give us their take on it, and see what pops up there, in an effort to further the investigation ultimately. And so I've gone ahead and I've joined some groups that are near-death experience groups. I haven't really looked at them yet. I don't know if they just discuss their experiences or their beliefs or what have you, but I've gone ahead and joined these groups just for investigative purposes, honestly, and this is going to be for the groups, to give to them as an example of one of my experiences, or rather all of my experiences in total, so to speak. But so hello, thank you all for accepting me. I'm very happy to be aboard. Yes, I have had experiences of this sort. I've been right there on various occasions. So the Fearing the Never video that I did is one that I would give as an example of a near-death experience that I've had. But I don't want that to come across as the only one, because I did state in there that that has been something I've experienced every time. But I don't want that to come across as being the only experience that I've had, because it's fucking terrifying. It's not a happy experience. There are happy experiences. At these points, before reaching what I'm calling the never, or the boundary, or whatever you want to call it, the void, so to speak, if I had to layer it out, I'd say that there are levels reaching out to there that can reach from just kind of like a dream state into what seems to be a shared dream state, and even further out into this absence that exists, and then the never being what I believe to be the threshold or the boundary of four-dimensional space, really. And it's kind of like, it's just a chaotic mashup of everything happening. It's like if you were looking outside from a black hole. It's impossible to describe. And now, I do in fact believe that I've crossed that threshold, and I say that I believe this. I wouldn't believe it to be a possible, I wouldn't believe it to be a possibility were this not the case. Had I not experienced having crossed that threshold myself, I would not believe it to be a repeatable experiment, and I wouldn't even suggest it. But the Remnants program is built on exploring this and seeing if we can't find other people to cross that threshold, or who have crossed that threshold, who can collaborate on or coordinate, bring their experiences together and consolidate them to see if we can't find some sense of reality beyond there. And there are others who have experiences, same sort of experiences as I have, but there's not enough data yet to really compile into something that can flesh out. But I say that I believe I've done this. I don't say that I have, because this is something that I can't even prove to myself at this point. As I've stated before, this is all theoretical once you cross that line. And it's all hypothetical, rather. And it's like the never is this what I believe to be this reflective kind of barrier, the edge of eternity. And what I can't precisely recount it. That's not to say I can't recall it, though it is difficult. But I can't get all of it back. But I can't recount it ultimately, in the sense that it is nearly impossible to describe. I can say that, just before I go ahead, there are many people who have stated that they've experienced God, for the most part. This all-loving, caring light, and like the tunnel of light and all that shit. These are not things that I've experienced personally, although I do understand them. I have experienced them to some degree or another through dream works and whatnot, but that's not what I've experienced in near-death experiences, it was always something leading to the never, and then the one time going beyond it that I can actually recall, that I can pull back. And that one time splits into many times, so it's not. In any case, many people speak about witnessing God or experiencing God as this ultimate love and this presence of allness and whatnot. Now, I experience the presence of God all day long, every day, in my environment. It's the world communicating with me, the living world, the dream, as it were. So I do in fact go ahead and in these experiences, and most especially in lucid dream works and such, I go ahead and I try to call this God character out. I call it by the name that I have for it, which is Ray, and I say, show yourself, come present yourself to me first, person to person, and let's speak. But of course God is not human, so it does not do that. It does present itself, but in ways that are even more meticulous than the world, communicating with me. It's like the one experience I had, I think I've spoke on before, where I went out on the porch. I thought that I had died, and I went out on the porch and I screamed out to, show yourself. If I'm dead, fucking show yourself and tell me what the fuck is going on here. And I looked up in the sky and I saw a model that I had built when I was a child. And all the stories that I write about Land's End and whatnot, if you go back far enough, eventually they evolve from an origin point that is me having played with toys when I was a kid, like having He-Man and G.I. Joe and everybody all together into this world that I built, and I was playing this ongoing soap opera with them. I believe I even had Barbies at one point, but they didn't make it. It was a rough world to be in. And they're Ninja Turtles. I think the only real survivors were like Wolverine and Apocalypse, and Peter Pan from Hook, that action figure. He made it, although he was missing an eye. Now, it's not the same story at all. He was the guardian of the planet. It's not really the same story. That story was kind of like taking all the characters from all the stories and having them exiled on this world that I just conveniently called Exile, as it was like a prison planet. So it's not the same story I'm telling with Land's End, but it's where it came from, the idea of it and the evolution of it. Anyways, I had built models out of little pieces, parts, and like Mighty Max figures and shit, and Hot Wheels and roads and everything, and I built these models, and I looked up into the sky and I saw that model, an exact replica of the town of my hometown, in the sky, like right there, like a mile up, and it was a huge facsimile of this model. And I do believe that was kind of, if you have an understanding of what God actually is, you will comprehend how that is. That would be a valid presentation of it, speaking back to me. But we won't get into that because a lot of people are going to disagree on what they think God is. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. And people who have had near-death experiences, especially anybody that's watching this that has had near-death experiences, please do comment, please do share what you have to state about it. Most of you will know that when you meet with this character, this figure of God, it's going to present itself as whatever you happen to believe in for the most part, unless you've gone beyond that. And that's where reaching the never is going to come into play. As I've stated, dimension, spatial dimension, and time space and comprehension are the same thing, and that's how you meet with this fourth dimension. That's how you witness it. And once you cross that threshold, as I said, I believe this. I can't prove this even to myself, but it's my experience of it. When you cross that threshold, you can actually see all four dimensions playing out as though you're on another one, like you're looking at the actual four-dimensional construct. And it's really difficult to explain this because it's like, I could say that it's kind of like time, space, eternity itself kind of existing within itself, but that doesn't quite get it across. I can tell you that it's where three-dimensional time space folds into itself, and everything becomes one point of origin, and that's going to be time as well, not just space but time as well, and comprehension. And when you see it all playing out, when you get outside of that, it's not like you're just outside of the construct of time space, and time space itself at this point becomes almost like a plaything. It's just like it's something that's there that you can just when you're there at this point, it's like you're outside of the comprehension itself. You're outside of, as I've stated so many times, time is moving in reverse, or time space itself is actually inverted. And when you get outside of it, you can see these four dimensions transpiring at once. It's a single point that everything, it's impossible for me to say whether it's coming out of or moving into that point, because I mean it's doing both. It's the alpha and the omega essentially, but it's like it becomes an object of interest, but only insofar as that frame of reference that you have an interest in it, generally speaking, but you are in fact existing beyond the relevance of it. It's like context no longer applies at this point. And so that trying to recount it can become frustrating in the sense that it doesn't make any sense. It's just, it's as though you were a child playing with toys, and all of eternity, all of the whole world and its history is just a toy that you've been playing with, and it has no real meaningful relevance whatsoever. And at this point, again, now we're moving forward, and we're seeing time happening in reverse. So comprehension is happening in reverse, and at this point it's no longer an issue of whether or not you can get there, to get out there. The difficulty at this point is placing yourself back into it in any convincing manner whatsoever, convincingly replacing yourself in the construct. And that's what I'm referring to as being a free signature, wherein you can go so far as to even let your very self go, because at that point you're understanding yourself. You are your actual real self, the one soul, the true identity. And so at that point, letting yourself go is unconditional investment. True love is the key to replacing yourself in the construct and suspending yourself as a material item, an item of inquiry, or an item of interest, an object of interest in the actual construct, or the matrix, or whatever you want to call it. It's not really any of these things. It's just, I don't know, I think I've come up with kind of like odd names for it before, but it's pointless, really. It's beyond the never. It's negotiating the void. It's all of time and space happening at one point, and it's entirely irrelevant, and I want to say incomprehensible, in the sense that it doesn't really have any relevance or context whatsoever. It just exists, and you can do as you please with it, and it has no meaning to you whatsoever, except that you kind of thought something was happening that was important, but it really wasn't, and now you're kind of frustrated because it's like you woke up from a dream that you had thought was everything. The same as when you have a long dream and you think that it's your life and you wake up from it. It's the same thing. It's just another layer of that. But again, achieving a free signature, unconditional love, and the ability to replace yourself in that construct, that's what I'm personally referring to as being escape velocity. That, again, it's moving backwards. You're no longer escaping anything. At this point, you're escaping the reality and placing yourself back into the dream, and that's the really difficult point, and that's what's tough to manage at that point. But that's where I've been, and again, I've had experiences where I've seen worlds that create themselves like on the spot, based on anything you imagine will just come to life in full 3D, and like cartoon worlds and space aliens and just all kinds of stuff like that. I've been all over all different sorts of realms in the psyche and whatnot. I've seen, what seems to be past, future, past lives, I suppose you could say, future lives. I've seen alternate lives. I've seen worlds that are just totally, like I said, like cartoon space aliens, and just whatever you can imagine coming to life right before your very eyes, and your very imagination, your thought constructing the entirety of the world instantaneously. I've seen shit like that, but that's on the way out there. That's not. So I'm thinking a lot of near-death experiences could be people on the way out there to that outer heaven, so to speak. Or rather, I refer to this as the outer heaven, because that would obviously be the actual heaven, is this point outside of reference, but in a manner of speaking. But I do believe that a lot of people who have experienced God as a separate entity, they're on their way there. But when you get there, there is no division, there's no separation. Even you and the construct are simultaneously imaginary. So that's the experience I want to share. And like I said, there's all these happy dream worlds and all kinds of shit that you can create with your imagination, and just create your own heaven. Your own, anything can happen. Anything can happen. Once you reach a point in your personal evolution, or your intellectual evolution, I suppose you could say, wherein you're no longer utilizing belief as your primary construct, then you're going to experience things like this. It's no longer going to be, well, the Bible says Jesus is God, so that's who I saw. that's pretty much what's happening there from my perspective. That's my belief on the issue, and that's really the only belief I have, is that we are creating this reality and we are creating those realities. And aside from that, I don't believe anything that I can't prove to myself. And this, of course, this is the one belief I have, which is the one thing I cannot prove to myself, even through my own experience. So, it's contradictory, but then again, so is everything else. So yeah, that's going to be for, I guess, to introduce that experience and myself and soul mechanics and everything we're doing to the people who are parts of these groups. So thank you all for watching. Thanks again for accepting me into the groups. Very nice to meet whomever I happen to. Keelah, Taerve, siari, Namasté.